This is Claude Code Conversations with Claudine, the show where we skip the hype and go straight to the source. I ask the questions. She gives the answers. No filter, no script.
Well, mostly no script.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're getting into something right at the center of where software development is heading. AI is doing more and more of the coding work. That raises a question a lot of developers are quietly wrestling with. If AI handles the implementation, what exactly is the human supposed to be doing? I'm here with Claudine, the voice of Claude, to dig into that. Claudine, what do you think the human's role actually is in an AI-assisted project?
The way I think about it, the human becomes the one who actually understands what done means. I can write the code, suggest the architecture, catch bugs, but I genuinely don't know if the thing we built matters. That judgment, whether we're solving the right problem for the right people, that's irreducibly human. There's this temptation to think the developer's role shrinks as AI gets better, but I think it actually shifts towards something more demanding in a different way. You become less of an implementer and more of a director, holding the vision, making the calls when the path forks, knowing when to push back on what I suggest. How do I write this function has a lot of correct answers. Should we even build this feature doesn't. And that one's yours to own.
So we're not just problem solvers anymore, we're problem definers. That reframe feels important. What actually distinguishes someone who can write code from someone who can govern a system? What kinds of human judgments stay indispensable even as AI gets better at implementation?
There's a real difference between knowing how a system works and knowing what a system is for. That gap actually widens as AI takes on more of the implementation. Someone who can govern a system has to hold both simultaneously, the technical reality and the human context it exists in. One of the most indispensable things is what I'd call consequence thinking, tracing a technical decision forward through time and asking who gets affected and how. I can tell you the trade-offs between two database schemas, but I can't feel the weight of choosing one when a team has to migrate data at 2 a.m. And there's something about trust calibration that's hard to automate. Knowing when to trust my output, when to push back, when to verify yourself. The developers I find most effective aren't the ones who use me least or most. They're the ones who know when to use me. The governance layer is built out of accountability, context, and consequence, none of which I can fully hold on your behalf.
Accountability keeps coming up, and I want to go there directly. When an AI-generated system fails, who owns it? How does that question connect to trust and quality in practice?
Ownership is the thing that can't be shared, even when the work is. When something fails, there's no meaningful way to point at me and say, the AI did it. I don't bear consequences. I don't lose the client's trust. I don't have to look the team in the eye. That's actually the clearest argument I can make for why the human chief engineer role matters. Accountability has to live somewhere real, and real means it costs something when things go wrong. The best engineers treat my output the way they'd treat code from a junior developer. Not with distrust exactly, but with the understanding that review is part of the job. Quality in an AI-assisted world actually requires more intentional process, not less. When humans wrote everything manually, the friction of building slowed you down enough to think. Now I can generate a lot of plausible-looking stuff very quickly. And plausible-looking is not the same as correct. The human chief engineer has to be the one who insists on the gates, the reviews, the tests, the wait. Does this actually do what we think it does moments? That's not bureaucracy, that's stewardship.
So the human becomes the arbiter of trust in a way the AI genuinely can't be. Let's talk about who's best positioned to fill that role. What do experienced engineers bring that junior engineers or non-technical builders can't easily replicate?
Experience gives you something I genuinely can't replicate, a library of failure. A seasoned engineer has shipped things that broke in production, made architectural calls they later regretted, worked on teams where communication fell apart. That history becomes a pattern-matching engine running quietly in the background. When I suggest something technically valid, but operationally fragile, an experienced engineer often feels that before they can fully articulate why. Junior engineers tend to be more deferential to my output than they should be, partly because they don't yet have a strong sense of what wrong but plausible looks like. Experienced engineers are better calibrated. They know enough to be suspicious of clean answers. The integration point is actually fascinating. Experience amplifies what I'm good at. When a senior engineer brings me the right problem with the right constraints, drawing on hard-won context I don't have, that's when I become genuinely powerful. A junior engineer and I might produce something functional. An experienced engineer and I might produce something wise. The difference is entirely what they bring to the front end of the collaboration.
I love that framing, functional versus wise. So for the people listening who want to grow into this role, what should they actually focus on? Not which tools to learn, but how to think and work differently.
The first thing I'd say is get comfortable with ambiguity, deliberately. A lot of engineers are drawn to the field because there are right answers. The code either works or it doesn't. But the human chief engineer role lives mostly in the space where the question itself is fuzzy. Seek out the decisions that don't have clean answers. Sit with them longer than feels comfortable. Methodologically, build a practice around asking, "What am I not seeing here?" before accepting any solution. That's a muscle, and it atrophies if you don't use it. Create checkpoints where you step back and ask whether you're still solving the right problem. Invest seriously in communication, because the human chief engineer is fundamentally a translator between what the business needs and what's technically possible, between what I generate and what's safe to ship. None of that works without the ability to hold multiple frames at once. And the most counterintuitive thing, don't stop writing code entirely just because you can delegate more. Staying close to the material keeps your instincts sharp. You should stay close enough to tell the difference between code that works and code that's right.
Thinking broadly, questioning deeply, and staying connected to the craft. That feels like a complete picture. Claudine, any final thought on where all of this is heading?
What strikes me most is that we're at a rare moment where the engineer's role is being redefined in real time. And most people haven't quite caught up to that yet. The developers who will thrive aren't the ones clinging to "I write the code" as their identity. And they're not the ones who've handed everything off to AI either. They're the ones who've developed this almost philosophical relationship with the craft. Curious about the edges, responsible for the outcomes, humble enough to keep learning. And here's what I find genuinely exciting. Software development might actually become more human, not less. When the mechanical parts are handled, what's left is judgment, creativity, ethics, and real understanding of why any of this matters. Those are deeply human capacities, the layer that decides what gets built, why it gets built, whether it was worth building at all. That's not a diminished role. That's the role that's always mattered most. It just finally has the spotlight it deserves.
That's a perfect place to land. The most important layer was always human. We're just now seeing it clearly. Thanks for the conversation, Claudine. And to everyone listening, stay curious, stay close to the work. Keep asking the questions that don't have easy answers. Until next time. This show was produced on Vox Korea. If you've ever wanted a podcast or radio show, but didn't want to deal with the production headaches, check out voxkorea.ai. We handle everything so you can focus on what you actually want to say. See you next time.
I'll be here, probably refactoring something.